feedback. When a guy goes silent, there's this immediate assumption, especially in emotionally charged moments, that the silence means he's checked out, that he doesn't care back, that he's gone numb, or worse, that he's punishing you by pulling away. And I get it. The silence feels heavy. It feels like rejection, like emotional abandonment, feedback, and like it confirms every fear that's already been building inside you. But here's what most people miss: silence for a lot of men isn't emptiness. It's not indifference. Feedback. It's processing. You see, we live in a culture where men are taught, either directly or indirectly, that expressing their emotions in the moment can be risky. Feedback, that showing vulnerability, especially when things tense, might lead to being misunderstood, dismissed, or even ridiculed. And so instead of saying feedback, "I'm scared right now," or "I feel like I'm failing, I don't know how to make this better," he says nothing. Not because there's nothing going on inside, feedback, but because there's too much going on inside, and he doesn't know how to untangle it enough to say it in a way that doesn't make everything worse. When a man goes quiet, feedback, it's often not because he doesn't feel, it's because he feels so much that he's overwhelmed. Feedback. And when he comes back, when the silence ends, it doesn't mean he's just decided to pick up where things left off like nothing happened. It means he's been sitting with those thoughts backed, turning them over again and again, trying to figure out how to make sense of them before he says anything at all. Now, I know what some people are thinking: feedback. But why can't he just talk through it like I do? Why does he get checked out emotionally, leaving me to deal with the fallout? And that's a fair question. Feedback. It's frustrating when you're emotionally available and open, and it feels like the person you care about is retreating into a cave every time things get hard. Feedback. But you have to understand that the retreat isn't always about avoidance. For many men, it's about trying not to say the wrong thing. It's a protective instinct, not just for himself, feedback, but for the relationship. Think of it like this: if someone handed you a tangled ball of wires and told to hook it up to something without giving you instructions, and if you made one wrong move, feedback, the whole system would blow. What would you do? You'd pause, think. You'd probably be silent for a while as you try to make sense of it all. That's what's happening in his head. Feedback. The silence isn't laziness, caution. It's confusion. It's fear. And yes, sometimes it's guilt or shame too, especially if he knows he's hurt you. But here's the kickering: feedback. When he finally breaks the silence, what he says might not reflect everything he's thought, because even in breaking the silence, there's a filter at play. Feedback. He's still trying to protect himself and the relationship from further conflict. So he might not say, "I was terrified I was losing you," or "I didn't know how to fix things." Feedback. "And made me feel useless." He might say something much simpler, something like, "I needed space." And that doesn't feel good enough, right? It feels like a dismissal. Feedback. But it's what he can say. It's the tip of the iceberg of what he's actually been thinking. That's why I always say, listen not just for what he says, but for what it cost him to say it. Feedback. Because if you can understand that his silence was the storm before the courage, that his silence held the mess he didn't yet know how to name, feedback, then you'll begin to hear something deeper in even his simplest words. And this is important, not to excuse all behavior, but to understand where it's coming from. Feedback. Because when we understand someone, we stop personalizing their defenses. We stop thinking, "Quite, it must mean I'm not worth talking to."
No.
Feedback. Sometimes he's quiet because you are all worth talking to, and he wants to do it right. He just doesn't yet know how. Now, that doesn't mean you wait forever. Feedback. That doesn't mean you tolerate long silences that become stonewalling. It means you set healthy boundaries. Feedback. But you also create emotional space for the possibility that he's not absent. He's overwhelmed. And in that space, you give the relationship a better chance to evolve. Because the truth is feedback. Most men who dob want to talk eventually. They want to connect, but they need time to convert the whirlwind in their head into words they feel safe saying out loud. Feedback. And if we expect them to do that instantly on our timeline, we might end up pushing them further into silence rather than inviting them out of it. So when the silence ends, really listen. Feedback. Not just with your ears, but with your empathy. Because what he's really thinking in that moment might be exactly what you needed to hear all along. He just had to find the strength to say it. Feedback. Just because the silence ends doesn't mean everything's fine now. That's one of the biggest conceptions we run into. This idea that the moment he starts speaking again, feedback, the issue must be behind you. He's talking again. So clearly he's over it, right? Clearly he's moved on. And that can feel like a slap in the face. Feedback. Especially if you've been sitting with the silence like it was punishment, wondering what you did wrong, questioning the entire relationship. Feedback. Overthinking every last word from the last conversation. But let me tell you something that might be uncomfortable to hear, but is absolutely vital. When he starts talking again, feedback, there's a good chance he hasn't moved on from the issue. He's just reached the point where he can show up again. That's not resolution. That's re-entry. Feedback. It's not the end of the story, it's the next chapter. And what's happening inside him in that moment is far more complex than it might appear on the surface. Feedback, when he re-engages, when he texts or shows up, or makes that small talk that feels like he's pretending everything's normal, he's testing the waters. Feedback. He's not necessarily trying to avoid the deeper conversation. In fact, part of him might want to go there, but another part of him is terrified, because here's what's going through his Minji. Back. If I open up again, will it lead to another argument? Will I be understood? Or will everything I say be taken the wrong way? At hesitation. That's not coldness. Back. That's fear of repeating the same emotional loop. He just went silent to escape. He's also thinking, what version of me is she expecting now? Because in the silence, feedback, he's had time to imagine what you're thinking, how angry or disappointed or hurt you might be. And now that he's re-entered the conversation, even if he doesn't say it, feedback, he's walking on emotional eggshells. He's wondering whether one wrong word will send things back into chaos. And you might be looking at him thinking, oh, why won't you just talk to me? Feedback. Why are you pretending nothing happened? But this isn't pretense. This is self-preservation. For a lot of men, feedback, especially those who haven't many emotionally safe experiences growing up or in past relationships, feedback. It feels easier to sweep things under the rug, to ump everything with the risk of getting it all wrong again. They think maybe if we just move forward, feedback, the storm will pass, but moving forward without addressing what caused the break doesn't lead to growth. It just buries the issue only for it to resurface later. Feedback. And that's where the relationship gets stuck in patterns, because neither person truly understands what the other needs in that fragile moment after the silence. And here's the other layering: feedback. Sometimes he wants to talk, but he genuinely doesn't know how. That might sound like a cop-out, but it's not. A man might come back thinking he's ready to say how he feels, feedback, only to find himself shutting down mid-conversation, not because he's withholding on purpose, but because the words don't feel safe or even clear in his own mind yet. Feedback. He's internally battling this voice saying, don't mess this up, while at the same time feeling like he's expected to perform emotional fluency in real time. Feedback. So what you get instead is a version of him that seems distant or vague, and it feels like he's emotionally unavailable, when in reality, feedback, he's emotionally guarded, and that guard has less to do with you than it does with his own fear of being misunderstood or mishandled. This is why when the silence ends, feedback. The most important thing you can do is not demand immediate resolution. Don't go into the first 5 minutes of reconnection with all the questions you've stored up. I know that's tempting. Feedback. I know you want clarity. But if you try to force depth right away, you risk pushing him back into retreat. He's just reopened the door. Don't slam it with a tidal wave of expectation. Instead, feedback. Give space, not distance. Space. There's a difference. Distance is avoidance. Space is presence with patience. It's saying, I'm here when you're ready. Feedback. And I want us to really understand each and not just get past this. That approach disarms defensiveness. Feedback. It creates an environment where he can risk saying more than just the surface level things. And I want to be clear, this doesn't mean you ignore your own needs. Feedback. It doesn't mean you sit around forever waiting for him to find the words. Your emotional safety matters just as much. But what I'm talking about is strategy, emotional intelligence, feedback, knowing that if you create a space where his truth can emerge without being shut down or judged immediately, you're more likely to get to the root of the issue and build trust in the process. Feedback, because what he's really thinking after the silence ends isn't always obvious. Sometimes he's thinking, I hope she'll let me explain without assuming the worst, or I want to reconnect. Feedback. But I don't want to be attacked, or even I'm scared that what I say won't be enough. So when he comes back, don't just listen for the words. Watch the energy. Pay attention to the effort. Feedback. And understand that breaking the silence doesn't mean he's finished feeling. It means he's finally ready to try again. And that alone might be one of the most vulnerable things he'll do. Feedback. He's not pretending it's over. He's praying it's not. Feedback. When a guy finally comes back after going silent, one of the things we rarely stop to consider is just how much he's had to weigh internally to get to that point. Feedback. We often think silence means someone's checked out or they're off living their life without a second thought about us. But what we don't realize is that while we're wondering, feedback, why isn't he talking? He's often sitting in his own internal debate, asking himself, should I even say anything? Is it safe to reconnect? That silence, however frustrating, can be filled with calculations, with self-questioning, and with this one big question looping in his mind, feedback. Is it worth it to open up again? Because for a lot of men, vulnerability doesn't just feel uncomfortable. It feels like a risk, an emotional investment that might not pay off. Feedback. And if he's had past experiences, maybe with you, maybe before you, where opening up led to judgment, dismissal, or an emotional blow up, then he's thinking hard before he does it again. Feedback. He's not just thinking about how to reconnect. He's thinking about the cost of doing so. And here's the part that might surprise you. That cost isn't always about ego. A lot of the time, feedback. It's about shame. It's about fear. It's about the emotional toll of being misunderstood. Men are told over and over again that they're supposed to be strong, stoic, composed. Feedback. So when things get messy, when they feel lost, unsure, or emotional, they don't always have a map for how to navigate it, let alone how to communicate it. And when you ask, feedback, why can't you just tell me how you feel? His inner response might be, I don't even know if I'm allowed to. So instead of diving into that vulnerability, he pulls back. Feedback. And in that space, what he's doing is trying to figure out if re-entering the emotional arena with you will lead to healing or more hurt. He's thinking, if I show her how I feel, feedback, will she actually see it, or will it be used against me later? That's not him playing games. That's him doing emotional risk assessment. And here's where it gets even more layered. Feedback. Sometimes the reason he's silent isn't because he doesn't want to reconnect. It's because he does. And he's afraid that reconnecting will only lead to another round of disconnection. Feedback. That fear makes him cautious. He's not just protecting himself from you. He's protecting himself from the possibility of repeating the same pain. You might think he's checked out. Feedback, but he might be sitting there replaying your last conversation in his head over and over. Feedback, trying to figure out if there's a version of coming back that doesn't cost him his dignity or emotional safety. You see, people talk about emotional availability like it's a switch you flip. Feedback, you're either open or you're closed. But it's not that simple. Emotional availability is a sliding scale. It's something that gets tested and reinforced over time. Feedback. And every time someone opens up and gets shut down or made to feel small, it reinforces the idea that vulnerability is dangerous. That silence is safer. And even if he wants connection, feedback, if he doesn't believe that his truth will be received with care, he'll choose distance over risk. And the thing is, even when he does come back, feedback, even when he makes that move to reconnect, whether it's a message, a casual conversation, or something more direct, he might still be holding back emotionally. Feedback. That doesn't mean he's not interested. It means he's scanning the environment. He's asking, is it okay to be honest here? Am I walking back into another fight? Feedback. Or am I walking into a space where I can just be real? That's why sometimes he says after the silence feels surface level, like he's just skimming the top of what's really going on. Feedback. It's not because he has nothing deeper to say. It's because he's waiting to see how what he does say lands. If you respond with curiosity, with empathy, feedback. If you create emotional space instead of tension, he might go deeper. But if he senses judgment or even a subtle tone that suggests he's already failed, he'll pull back again. Because for him, feedback, the silence was a shield, and stepping out from behind it took more courage than he's probably letting on. And no, it's not your job to fix that for him. Feedback. You're not responsible for doing all the emotional heavy lifting. But if you care about the connection, feedback, it is your job to understand that what's happening isn't about being emotionally lazy. It's about emotional survival. And survival instincts are hard to override. Feedback. So if he comes back and seems hesitant or guarded or just not quite there yet, don't rush to the conclusion that he doesn't care. He might care deeply. Feedback. He might be trying to summon the strength to speak a truth he's scared will be rejected. And if you can meet that moment with presence instead of pressure, feedback, you give him the best possible reason to risk opening up again. Because sometimes feedback, the most important thing he's thinking after the silence isn't, I don't care. Oh, I'm over it. It's, please let this be safe again. Feedback. When the silence finally breaks and he starts to speak again, there's this quiet expectation in the air. Like the next thing he says is going to explain everything. Like he'll offer clarity, feedback, closure, or maybe even apology. But often what comes out isn't what you were hoping to hear. It might sound brief, vague, or even frustrating. Feedback. And that disconnect between what you wanted and what you got can stir up a whole new round of doubts. Does he even care? Is this all I get? But the truth is feedback. What he's saying in that moment isn't necessarily the whole story. It's just what he feels able to say out loud. Feedback. And what he's really thinking is often something deeper. I want to be understood, not just heard. Most people underestimate just how deeply men crave understanding. Feedback. We think of men as needing respect or needing space or needing control of their emotions. But at the core of all that is a basic human desiring to be seen for who they are beneath the defenses. Feedback. When a man finally starts speaking after silence, he's not just giving words, he's offering a piece of himself that he's been holding back. Feedback. And he's quietly hoping that it won't be minimized, judged, or misread. See, he knows what the silence did. He knows it caused pain. He knows you've been wondering, worrying. Feedback. Maybe even getting angry. So now there's pressure on every word he says. And in his mind, he's walking into a conversation where he has to be perfect just to be taken seriously. Feedback, that fear of saying the wrong thing, of being misunderstood or instantly challenged is massive. So instead of opening up fully, he tests the waters. He says something small, something safe. Feedback. Not because he doesn't have more to say, because he's measuring whether this is a place where the rest of him will be accepted. And that's where a lot of couples hit a wall. Feedback. Because while one person is sitting there thinking, finally, he's talking, this is my chance to get answers, he's sitting there thinking, Feedback. This is my chance. She'll let me speak without tearing me apart. There's this emotional mismatch. He's trying to feel his way back into connection. Feedback. While you might be trying to solve a problem or get clarity or even just express how deeply the silence affected you. Both people have valid needs, but the timing is delicate. Feedback. What he wants in that moment isn't just to get words out, it's to be received feedback. He wants to know that when he shares what's going on in his mind, even if it's messy or unclear, you won't automatically assume the worst. Feedback, that you won't fill in the blanks with your own narrative before he's had a chance to explain his. That's the fear, being reduced to the worst version of himself. Feedback, abase something he says imperfectly. So often men choose silence because they've been trained to believe that no matter how they say it, they'll get it wrong. He might not say that out loud. Feedback. Of course, he might even fully understand it himself, but on some level, he's looking for a kind of listening that doesn't just hear the words, but looks underneath them. Feedback, a kind of listening that says, I'm not just reacting to your words. I'm trying to understand your experience. That's a powerful thing. Feedback. Because when a man feels understood, not just tolerated or analyzed or forgiven, but genuinely changes him, it softens him, it draws him out. And in that space, feedback, he starts to say the things that really matter, not because he's been pressured into it, but because he feels safe enough to let his guard down. And here's the thing, feedback. This doesn't mean you don't get to share your truth. It doesn't mean you don't get to say, oh, that silence hurt me. I felt alone. I felt discarded. Those are important truths. Feedback. But the difference between a conversation that leads to healing and one that leads to more distance is how those truths are brought into the space. If you can share them not as accusations, feedback, but as a window into your experience, you invite him to do the same. You stop the cycle of defensiveness and create a bridge instead. That bridge is built on empathy, not agreement. Empathy, feedback. You don't have to agree with why he went silent. You don't have to agree with everything he says. But if you can try to understand what was happening inside him, even for a moment, feedback. You change the entire dynamic. You give him a chance to be more than just the mistake he made. And in return, you make it far more likely that he'll do the same for you. Feedback. Because at the end of the day, most men aren't hoping to be right. They're hoping to be understood. And when you give them that gift, feedback, you'll often find that the walls they protect themselves start to come down on their own. And that's when the real conversation finally begins.